In 1898, Antoni Gaudi was invited by the industrialist Eusebi de Guell to design a church for the industrial village that Guell was then building south of Barcelona. Guell was wealthy from textile production. Work began on the new church, but it was never finished. The building we're looking at here was intended to be only the crypt or the basement level of a much larger structure which didn't materialize. This crypt is one of a series of projects which includes the Casa Batlló and the Casa Mila, where Gaudi came close to the expression of a new type of architecture which he thought was suitable to a modern and culturally emergent Catalonia. His experiments in modernism came only a few years before those of Le Corbusier, Gropius and Mies van der Rohe, but they couldn't have been more different. The northern modernists saw the way forward through technology, a sense of sparsity, and expressions of pure form. On first view, Gaudi's new architecture has a superficial similarity with such buildings as Neuschwanstein. The difference with Gaudi appears to be that he's prepared to push beyond the fantastic imagery and explore every aspect of what his image implies, that is, the structure, the space, the light and the material. Gaudi sought to discover a new form of structural integrity. His aim was to express, in a literal way, the line of force traced by a load as it's transferred to the ground. In more traditional modernism, as in the Gothic, this line of force conforms to the shape of the structural element imposed upon it. Gaudi made a famous model of this building. It's called the funicular, and it's shown here reconstructed. It represents the building in its entirety, not just the crypt. He suspended weights from thin wires and hung the model upside down to demonstrate the correct arrangement for his structural elements. In a sense, this gives us a clue as to how Gaudi's work differed fundamentally from those working in the modern mainstream at the time. The building load for him was not an abstract thing, and in the crypt we see how this is realized. Despite the tectonic elaboration of the roof structure, there is a feeling that the space is somehow carved out of the ground. The columns feel as though they've been hoisted up, almost as if they're pushing the load above them into place. This is pretty much the opposite way from which we imagine almost instinctively that a column is going to work. Some of the columns in this building have the appearance of animal bones. The other columns, along with the walls, look like they're protected by a layer of old skin. The stained glass windows relate to the walls they sit in the same way as the eye to the eyelid, but not of the panel to the mechanical support. There is a sense of the symbolic at play in this structure, but it's not the symbolism that we normally associate with Roman Catholicism. In particular, the plan doesn't conform to anything traditional, and the symbolism evident here tends toward the mythology of the underworld, the amphibian, the owl, the dragon, and maybe even Pan himself. It's as if the Christian God in some way shares this space with his opposite. The work also recalls something of the paintings of Francisco Goya, and these allusions appear again in the work of Joan Miró, popular movies like Pan's Labyrinth, and maybe even the architecture of Oscar Niemeyer. It has been suggested that Gaudi's work in general, and by implication this building, is influenced by the Gothic and the Baroque. But this is an assertion that doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The claim to influence, however, by the traditional Mudéjar style does appear more accurate. The crypt at Colonia Guell represents an extraordinary achievement in architecture. It reminds us that the path taken by the modern architects of the early 20th century wasn't as obvious as we're inclined to sometimes believe. Things could have been otherwise. And I think it's true to say as well that the building is somehow the better for not being completed.